Mega Man X6 is certainly an interesting topic of conversation. To all those who know the history of the Mega Man franchise, it is certainly one of the most infamous Mega Man games, having been bashed and beaten to the ground on the internet countless times since its original release all the way back in 2001. It's known for being rushed, punishing in obtuse ways, and is just overall a punching bag people really love coming back to. Myself included. That little speech I just gave is a tad bit redundant, I know. If you know anything about me, or have known me for years, Mega Man X6 is probably one of the reasons why. In the past 5 Mega Man X re-reviews, I've saved the soapbox material for the end of the video, since that seems to be when it resonates with the audience the most, instead of dumping it on the viewer at the very beginning of the video. In this case, I must do it now, because that conversation is the very foundation of this video. So let's talk about it. 5 years ago, I unknowingly created a video that would arguably change the course of my entire life. As melodramatic as that may sound, I think there's a lot of truth to that statement because I never had a belief this YouTube thing would actually go anywhere before 2017, despite that being every YouTuber's dream. This was a video that had gone by many names, but currently goes by Mega Man X6, one of the worst games I have ever played. This 1-hour behemoth covered X6 from top to bottom, every stage, every annoying little thing the game did, and what it was like to play for the first time back in 2015.
Mega Man X6 is one of the worst video games I have ever played in my entire life. Sonic 06, I'd play in an instant over this garbage. I figured there was no better way to start this review than by diving in immediately.
I'm sure you know all this already because it's one of my most popular videos. When I uploaded that video in February of 2017, I had 254 subscribers. Today, that number has risen to 127,000, and while the Mega Man X series was picking up steam when I did X4 and X5 back in the day, X6 really got the ball rolling as my video really resonated with a large audience. Of course, there was also a vocal group of people who thought the video was absolutely atrocious. It is simultaneously one of the most recognizable things I have done, and also the absolute most infamous as well. Regardless of which camp you, the viewer, may be in, I think this video is certainly worth considering because 5 years can change a lot of things. I was 16 when that came out. I'm 21 now, so it goes without saying that I'm a completely different person than I was then. But that begs the question of what we're doing here with this video. Going back to the re-reviews of the previous games, I said that I wanted to pay tribute to my original X retrospective turning 5 years old, and to give those videos a fresh coat of paint that is much more refined and watchable. At least to me. X6 is a challenge because of the fact that the rage is what makes the original video what it was. The more easygoing presentation for the new videos was a much needed improvement if you ask me, because of the fact that I just don't think the games ever deserved the treatment I gave them back in the day. Something I went in depth on when I re-reviewed Mega Man X2. However, it's not because I don't want to make videos that have any criticism. After all, in the past 14 moon cycles, I've done many negative reviews, but it's about directing that towards things I actually didn't enjoy and not being an over-the-top cartoon character for the sake of it. So, with X6. Over the years, through the various live streams, commentaries, offhanded remarks, and other videos, it's been made clear that my opinion on X6 never really changed. I've spent the better part of a year now thinking about how a re-review on Mega Man X6 would go, and that's when I came to the realization that the 2017 X6 review just can't be outdone. That's coming from me. You guys know, I hate most of my old videos, especially the angry ones. It's just so embarrassing and cringe to listen to yourself from high school scream into the mic about video games. But at the same time, that video is the perfect encapsulation of how I felt about X6 in my first playthrough and how I felt about it at the time. Originally, I wanted to do a video here where I calmly tore X6 apart, but I just don't think that's going to cut it when it comes to making a video that can stand on its own 2 feet without it being a retread of the original, just without the rage. At least with the Agent Clank revisit, we had the benefit of finishing the game that time. You could argue that some of these videos are retreads, but to me, the difference in attitude is part of the improvement, a very important one at that. In X6's case, it just feels to me like that would have been a waste. So the idea I settled on was doing something completely different. To pay tribute to my infamous review on Mega Man X6 turning 5 years old, I've decided to flip the script to make a video talking about all the things that Mega Man X6 does well, many of which I would refuse to acknowledge back in the day. And by the end, we'll assess how this changes my perspective on the game. If anything, this is a follow-up to the original video and not a remake. I've been really excited to do this video and I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's dive in immediately. I figured it would make sense to start with the obvious. One of the things the original video consistently gave X6 credit for was its music. Nothing has changed about that over the years. X6's soundtrack is definitely an X series highlight, from the intro stage where you tore the wreckage of the X5 colony, to the bangers coming out of the Fortress stages or Blaze Heatnix's stage. Or whatever you want to call it from Rainy Turtloid, I'm here for it. X6's music stands quite tall in the Mega Man series roster, which is saying a lot because when considering mainstream Mega Man games, that is a high volume of great soundtracks, but I definitely believe X6 is up there with the best. With that out of the way, we need to talk about how in X6, many of my issues with X5 have been improved upon. Let's go over them piece by piece. In X5, I thought the inclusion of Alia was very poorly handled. I mentioned that giving X and Zero a support team from the Hunter base is a good idea because it helps make the Maverick Hunters feel like a legit organization, a real team, because before we only ever saw X, Zero, occasionally Dr. Kane, and traitors, or people who don't get much screen time. So establishing a core cast of allies works, if you ask me. The problem was Alia's constant interference with the pace of the game, stopping players dead in their tracks. In X6, this issue has been entirely fixed because the dialogue between X or Zero and Alia is still fully there if you want to read it to learn more about the stages and obstacles, but if you want to blast your way through uninterrupted, Alia will just call you at certain spots of the stage and you need to push the select button to pick up and talk. Otherwise, you can keep going with the stage. A perfect middle ground. I think Alia probably could have been given more interesting things to say, but I suppose I can save that for next week. Ignoring Alia, X5's pacing was pretty poor in general. A majority of its stages revolved around a very slow-moving gimmick, which is maybe okay for one stage in the roster, but when multiple stages do something like that, the replayability of the game really starts to drop. And believe me, I'm not about to utter the phrase Mega Man X6 has good level design. I'm just going to say this much. After having replayed both of these games more times than I'd like to admit, X6 still manages to keep me in the action more than X5 does. For example, the intro stage managed to be fast-paced, while tutorializing its mechanics much more effectively than X5 did. In Blaze Heatnix's stage, in between your first and second fight with the floating donut PNG, you have to navigate through this room with fire spewing from the ground and from the ceiling. Trying to tank the hits here will see you losing a lot of health, so you have to slow your pace while simultaneously considering your timing. Not a good stage because of the snake bosses, but at least they keep mixing it up each time, right? In all honesty, not all the stages have bad concepts. Rainy Turtloid's stage being one of the better examples where you have to look for these tiny cores to progress while under the threat of health-reducing acid rain. It adds an element of pressure to these brief bits of exploration that gradually rises in complexity until you reach the final room, with some tight Mega Man X platforming in between, like this part where you have to time your wall jumps carefully to ride this platform to the end. I've never seen them use the mechanic like that before. Well, X2 kind of tried to, but made it really easy to damage boost. This level, barring the Nightmare system, is genuinely good. Blizzard Wolfang's stage is also one with good concepts, like having an avalanche fall in the opening. It's kind of fun to just see how far you can get on the stage before you need to dodge the ice. And despite my giving the falling ice blocks a lot of grief in the old video, it's for a very limited justification because you might die a lot here, but this is a very simple setup. See the pattern, react accordingly, if you fail, you die. In the final room, it's a really good platforming segment. Earlier, the random blocks potentially killing you isn't great, but in general I think this stage has quality platforming if you just take your time with it. It's very inconsistent that X and Zero could easily wall jump on the ice in previous games, but can't now. However, if you just ignore that and focus on the action of the stage, it's simple and entirely doable, especially as Zero with his double jump ability. I just wish X6 had more examples you could point to in that regard because the rest of the levels are still pretty difficult to defend. Especially once the Nightmare system gets involved, where playing stages causes negative effects on the other stages, in inverse of X1 and X3 where stages would change in your favor. Most infamously, the Nightmare causes the Amazon area and the Anami Temple to be blacked out for certain segments. Real fun stuff. Besides that, I mean, Infinity Maginian really does just toss a bunch of stuff on the screen and says, "Good luck, kid." Shield Sheldon deals with a lot of bouncing lasers around the room, but when the lasers refuse to fire in the right direction, leaving me standing there waiting for like 90 seconds, I get pretty annoyed. Ground Scaravich takes its decent gimmick of randomized rooms but just floods the screen with nightmare viruses instead of crafting interesting platforming. And I won't even speak of this abomination right now. So yeah, X6 is still not the most tightly designed set of levels. In fact, many of them aren't that fun at all, but I do appreciate the pace of the game being kept up in comparison to X5, and some good concepts do leak into good execution in X6, which I think is worth acknowledging. Another thing that works about X6 for me is its two playable characters. Of course, you'd be playing as Mega Man X in Mega Man X6. But spoiler alert, Zero is back in action. Something the game's promotional material spoiled pretty heavily by stating the objective is to locate Zero, even though you wouldn't even know Zero was someone you could locate following the ending of X5 until you played the game. But anyway, X basically plays the same as always, but following up on the ending of X5, X has taken up Zero's Z-Saber, but is not as proficient with it as Zero was. By pressing the triangle button, X will swing Zero's saber and do a respectable amount of damage, even being able to dash cancel with it like you could as Zero. X starts X6 with the Falcon armor, only with limited functionality a la the 4th armor in X5. But here you can unlock 2 new ones that still require you to collect all 4 pieces before use. However, I think these armors are much cooler than the ones from X5. First, you have the Blade armor, which gives X the ability to dash incredible distances in the air, in all 4 directions no less, a decent charge shot, and a really powerful Giga attack that can even rip apart the final boss. It also has a really cool design with the saber just coming out of X's Buster arm, which is something they even managed to capture in the sprite work, which is an awesome attention to detail. X's other armor is the Shadow armor, which looks really cool, a full-on ninja Mega Man X that can stand on spikes and leap to the ceiling. The Gaia armor in X5 was going for basically the same thing, but it just looked slow and clunky, which is exactly how it played. Here, I actually use the Shadow armor in stages because it's cool. It has a devastating saber charge shot that's very useful and has also another wildly powerful Giga attack. It really pulls its own weight despite not being able to use special weapons. Although, besides the Yemar option, which surrounds X and Zero with dragonflies that both deal damage and partially tank it for you, a fantastic weapon. But as I was saying, besides that, the weapons aren't that useful in this game anyway. For Zero, his mechanics actually got reworked pretty decently. Zero plays exactly the same as he did in X4 and X5, but his animations have been retooled. On the sprite sheet for X4, Zero has more frames of cooldown when doing his saber slashes, but the cooldown of the 3rd swing can be changed to the next combo, when in X6 the cooldown of the 3rd swing lasts longer. However, X6 makes up for that by making saber dash canceling from the first 2 swings much easier. I try to do this in X4 and X5, and while it has its uses, it often gets me hit more than I'd like, and X5 has a special move for Zero that makes it impossible once you get it, something the improved project fixed. When in X6 you can just go combo mad and it looks pretty based. Zero also gets this spinning move from Rainy Turtloid that's a lot of fun to pull off. The guard shell also has this glitch where it does more damage for your saber, which is pretty neat. On the other side of that coin, many Zero techniques in this game just suck, like diving into the abyss by pressing up. The same button you need to latch onto ropes, suspended over bottomless pits. Classic stuff. One of my favorite improvements for Zero in this game is the Z Buster, which they tried giving Zero in X5, it just wasn't very useful with how slow it was to fire and to recover from. In X6, it's much faster and does great damage to enemies from afar, but it doesn't fire as fast as X's Buster, nor can you charge it. Giving X a short-range saber move that does decent damage but isn't as good as Zero's, and giving Zero a long-range shot that isn't as good as X's but does decent damage is a great idea, and I think it helps balance out the 2 playstyles really well, giving you the best of both worlds but also allowing you to pick which of the 2 you'd rather be quicker in. If you want to shoot faster and use charge shots, then you pick X, but if you want to swing the saber really quickly, then you grab Zero. But like I said, you aren't locked out of the thing the other character does best, you just don't do it as well. The last thing I want to mention on the gameplay of the base game would be how X6 also simplified the systems introduced in X5. The game doesn't have a ticking clock, so the random factor is completely gone. There are 3 endings, but these are easily achieved through clear parameters. Beat the game as X without rescuing Zero and you get an ending with X and Alia. Beat the game as X after having rescued Zero and you get an ending with X, Zero, and the support team, and beat the game with Zero and you get an ending for him. Simple and effective. The additional part system introduced in X5 has also been streamlined. Honestly, how it worked in X5 wasn't even that complicated, it was just not clearly explained to the player. How it works here is that these rescuable Reploids in each stage do have a function. In X5, some stages had these and they just gave you free health and an extra life. In X6, many Reploid hostages will have the parts, and by saving them you unlock those parts. However, the levels are littered with these nightmare viruses, some of the most annoying Mega Man enemies as the game spams them all over the screen as much as possible. The nightmare viruses will target the Reploids and you have to save them before that happens. If they corrupt the Reploid, you lose out in the part it was carrying, assuming it was carrying a part in the first place, which some don't. X and Zero can equip a max of 5 parts, but to use them you have to collect Nightmare Souls, which are dropped from dead nightmare viruses, and given to you by defeating boss battles. Most players probably won't reach the requirement for 5 parts unlocked, but you will definitely be able to take advantage of the jumper parts, the hyper dash, the rapid 5, the life recover, all that good stuff in a normal playthrough. The system between Nightmare Souls and parts is also not really explained from what I remember, but I just think it's an easier thing to intuit than X5's was. That, and getting all the parts in X6 is a matter of exploration and not letting Reploids die, which is actively player-driven. None of that weapons and life plus versus weapons and energy plus business in the last game. Helps that no part required to beat the game can be corrupted. All that positive talk about X6 leads us swimmingly into Mega Man X6 Tweaks, the fan project from this fine fellow, the same guy from X5's improvement project and X4's undub, although I guess I got his name wrong as he said in the comments of the X5 video, so you can read the screen and check out the link to the X6 project in the description. But anyway, X6 Tweaks has been in the works for a decent while now, and like X5, I always knew I'd play it one day, I just didn't get the chance to do so until now. The aim of the project is to remove padding and other unneeded elements from X6 to overall make the game more balanced. The amount of things changed in the X6 Tweaks project is insane. You'd need to check out the README in order to see it all, but to, again, list the highlights, things have been streamlined significantly. For example, X can now use his armor pieces without collecting the full set. X and Zero share all heart tanks, life ups, energy ups, nightmare soul count, and rank. This means all the souls you collected that allow you to use parts as X don't have to be recollected as Zero, which was just needless padding. Parts allowance per rank has been edited so that you can use at least one part from the start of the game. Useless rescuable Reploids with no parts have been removed, corrupted Reploids respawn after you have to kill them, meaning no parts are missable, unarmored X as well as Shadow Armor X have been given an air dash, which comes in handy in one of the most infamous segments from the end of the game. Zero and Shadow Armor X's ability to leap to the ceiling has been extended, giving it more functionality. Zero's techniques have much more comfortable button mapping, meaning the Abyss dive won't happen. The characters have all had their cutscene portraits redrawn to look more appealing, and I think they look quite nice, especially in the case of Sigma here. And what I consider the most interesting of the changes would be how full bits of level design have been altered to make the game more approachable, like extending the ceiling in Commander Yamark's stage to avoid the blind spike jump I complained about in 2017. The jump length needed to get the Shadow Armor part in Metal Shark player stage has been decreased. Secret Lab 1 has removed a few spikes at the beginning to make the ice block the only thing X needs to get through the area, and Secret Lab 2 has added a platform below this part right here. So it's never a concern as to whether or not X can make the jump depending on what armor or part you have. All these things were done to make the game more approachable, but what is very interesting is that the developer has made some tweaks that serve to make the game more difficult as well. It sounds crazy, but remember, I don't think of X6 as this super hard game solely. I think of it as this game that's incredibly broken, and an uneven scaling of the difficulty was part of that. For example, the game sports things someone on their first playthrough would be heavily blindsided by, which would cost them a lot of lives. And then they have a really easy boss fight right after that. Now, Reploids don't refill your health, nor do they grant you extra lives. But the default life count has been raised from 2 to 4, and the EX tank raises it from 4 to 6. For the first time in a Mega Man X video, I'm actively telling you that the EX tank is useful. What a concept. You do need to watch out though, because getting a game over will now send you back to the start of the stage. This adds some real stakes to the game. In the original, I'd get to this part of, say, Rainy Turtloid stage and just damage boost my way to the Shadow Armor part. There's no reason not to, because death, even in the event of a game over, just sends you back a few feet. But I had to consider my approach when losing my lives meant going back to the start of the stage. Bosses like Commander Yamark have been edited to take less damage, but the Nightmare Mother boss has his health bar cut in half. See what I mean? Things that were ridiculously hard were made easier, and things that were comically easy have been made more difficult. And the game adds more organic challenges by making your lives worth more, as opposed to that talking point from my original video.
Again, fake difficulty.
There are so many great improvements here that really contribute to the playability of Mega Man X6, but as if that wasn't enough for you, he also released the Mega Man X6 Tweaks Patcher. What this does is allow you to completely customize how the game will be changed. You can change your dash speed and length, you can customize whether or not Shadow Armor X can cancel his saber swings, you can set how much damage every attack does to each enemy, mini-boss, and boss fight, you can set which nightmare effects are on, or just none at all, my personal favorite. You can choose what portrait art you want, what title screen you like, and the list indeed goes on. I love customization in games, and being able to edit Mega Man X6 to where I become a god and beat the final boss in 5 seconds while dashing over whole stage, which is like an ain't no thing, is definitely a ton of fun. Seriously, I love the work they did with this game. I say great job to all parties involved. But there is one question you may be wondering after the X5 video. Can the item game of X6 be fixed? Normally I don't tend to talk about the item game of X6 and X7, and that's because, as I've made clear before, I just have bigger fish to fry with these games compared to, say, X5, where that's one of the larger problems with the game. So, in X6 Tweaks, improvements have been made. I already mentioned using armors without needing all 4 parts, that's certainly a big help, but in general, X6's new feature of alternate stage routes make a least backtracking run virtually impossible. The alternate routes are something you find in these crystals which end in a different boss fight from the Maverick this stage is supposed to end with. These have some important collectibles hidden behind them like the sub-tank in Blaze Heatnix's stage, the jumper parts in Blizzard Wolfang's stage, and some items might as well be hidden behind an alternate route like the Shadow Armor part in Metal Shark Player's stage. The Tweaks project does allow you to escape from the alternate route without having to beat the extra boss fight first, which is handy in keeping the pace up, but you'll have to play Blaze Heatnix's stage twice to 100% the game, and if several stages are laid out like that, then there really is no least backtracking run. From what I understand, there won't be any future updates to the project, but if I were to just say what change I'd make, I'd allow an option to use the escape function to either return to the stage select or just return to the last checkpoint from the main stage so that you don't have to start the level over again. Probably easier said than done, but that's my idea. All in all, I don't even think the item game of X6 even really matters that much. I never feel that terrible about having to redo a stage to grab a sub-tank and say Blaze Heatnix's level. The problem in X5 was just the fact that doing it was supremely tedious with how much waiting the player would have to do in the various boring stages. Even with that enormous list of changes I just laid out, Mega Man X6 Tweaks makes one fundamental change that really transforms the game. The project utilizes a retranslated script. The original Mega Man X6 has one of the worst translations in series history. The story is hard to appreciate in X6 because it's something you can barely read. So many instances of awkward dialogue, words missing from sentences, or just rampant typos like X, there's no one else's left to fight when the line's just trying to say X, you're the only hunter left. X's ending with Alia in the original video was one I really roasted.
X and Alia are talking over Gate's body, and Alia asks if the Zero dream was from the nightmare. What X says literally doesn't make sense. He says, "I don't know, but I believe Zero is inside." Sounds fine, but that's followed by, "Sigma won't beat us, Maverick Hunters." Like, what? That doesn't make any sense, considering how X immediately continues his previous statement about Zero. So then, he is alive. What the hell kind of mistake was that?
What's actually happening in X6? Well, it's been a few weeks since the ending of X5 and the Earth is in shambles. Humans have taken refuge underground while Reploids are hard at work trying to fix the damage caused by the Eurasia incident. A Reploid scientist named Gate discovers a central piece of Zero and studies it, the power it contains causing Gate to go mad with the belief that he can finally unlock the secrets of Mega Man X and Zero, two Reploids whose pasts are shrouded in mystery. At least that's how the public understands it. With that power now at his fingertips, he creates a big plan to rule a nation of Reploids just for himself, including a virus called the Nightmare Virus, which infects the bodies of Reploids around the planet. The Nightmare Virus is subtly different from the Maverick Virus in that the latter infects Reploids and just makes them evil with the ideology that Sigma embodied. The Nightmare Virus takes over Reploids' entire body, making them a thoughtless machine controlled by the whims of the virus. When the virus hits, Gate's partner Isaac puts the blame on Zero, and that's why the world needs to rely on he and Gate's Special 8 Nightmare investigators that X now needs to put a stop to. X also discovers that Zero is still alive, and the two best friends resume their duty of taking out Mavericks and uncovering the secret behind the currently unfolding conspiracy. The story in this game is really interesting, with many different reasons as to why that is. But first, I want to discuss something. X6's story and entire existence is usually summed up with the Mega Man equivalent of, "Fun fact, Super Mario 2 in America was a sprite swap of a game called Doki Doki Panic." What I'm saying is that a fact everybody knows is that Mega Man X5 was originally going to be the last game in the Mega Man X series, which is why they went all out with the game's story. This much is true. What is also true is that Capcom making Mega Man X6 caused Keiji Inafune and the team at Inti Creates to change plans for the backstory of Mega Man Zero. That being the biggest shakeup to the plan, since Inafune said in the Complete Works book that he didn't really work much on X5 besides requesting it be the climactic final game. I can't imagine how much chaos this caused for the Mega Man Zero dev team, since they had to change the main villain from the Mega Man X we know into a new character called Copy X. To be honest, I prefer the story we got over X being a villain anyway, so I must say I'm not too shaken up by it. But that's a different subject. The point I'm trying to make is that X6's existence is often resented by fans for ruining the MMZ plans and betraying X5 being the last game, and wanting to declare the game non-canon or something like that to atone for it. I just think that's unfair because while X6 might not have been the plan, the game contributes a lot of interesting ideas to the mythos, expanding on things left wide open after X5. So yeah, the plans got changed, but I think it all worked out in the end. Although if I'm throwing people under the bus for X6 themed misinformation, I might as well toss myself in that mix as well. In the old review, I said that X6 was so rushed out the door by Capcom that it was released in the same year as X5. This is true from a certain point of view, one that's trying to make X6 look as bad as possible. However, the truth of the matter is that X5 released in 2001 in North America, early in the year at that. The game was released in 2000 in Japan and X6 came out a year later. Of course, that's not to say X6 wasn't rushed out the door, it definitely was, and that was a heavy burden on everyone making Mega Man X6, which sucks. Capcom just wanted to rush out another sequel and chaos emerging is the result. But ignoring that, I think Mega Man X6 is a pretty good story. First, it has a decently fleshed out backstory. Like I've been saying since the re-review on X1, these bosses you fight all have backstories, but X6 makes them the most interesting, as these Reploids were created by Gate, who is also a fleshed out character. He was a Reploid engineer who did the seemingly impossible, create Reploids whose data, like X and Zeros, could not be analyzed, but this caused his peers to get jealous and sabotage the Reploids that Gate created, or labeling them Mavericks, which got them disposed of, causing Gate to quit his research team. Some of his creations lived, but they, in the cases of Shield Sheldon and Rainy Turtloid, ending their lives to escape the guilt of having hurt the reputation of Gate, even if it wasn't their fault. But now, Gate has resurrected them all, which is why they're more loyal to him than ever. That's already interesting on its own merits, but it gets even more so when you realize that Alia was once Gate's partner when he was still a researcher. Alia actually having been involved in the sabotaging of some of Gate's revolutionary Reploids before she became a navigator for the Maverick Hunters. Giving Alia a backstory like this is fascinating because it really isn't something you'd expect. She debuts in X5 as this non-character who tells you to jump over bottomless pits, and here we find out she actually has this backstory where she's done things she's not proud of and still wrestles with that fact to this day. Sure, it's goofy that I just said Rainy Turtloid ends his life, but then, they really didn't have to put that much thought into a Mega Man story, and it works with the tone and universe the X series has set up thus far. In the actual story itself, I really like how previous events have left an impact. The whole game is centered around the colony from X5 having crashed on Earth and how it made the Earth temporarily uninhabitable for humans. Now, you could criticize the game for saying it's been 3 weeks since the end of X5 when X5's good ending says it's been 3 years, and to that I say, nah, whatever. It's a retcon, but one that leads to this pretty cool story that shows you the events of X5 had real consequences on X's world, so I'll take it. You could also bring up the fact that X5's good ending scenario is based on blowing up the colony, but X6 states that they may have stopped its full force collision with the Maverick virus and all that, but the debris that still landed did a real blow to the Earth, which is an explanation that works for me. Many previous games feel important in this one. At the end of X5, we learn that Sigma knows so much about Zero because of a mysterious scientist that also has a burning hatred for X, who also understands Zero. Might seem random, but then X6 introduces us to Isaac, a mysterious Reploid scientist that works alongside Gate. Basically a fact at this point that this guy is Dr. Wily from the original Mega Man games reborn in a robot body. X6 has Japanese voice acting in it, and Isaac is voiced by the same man who played Dr. Wily in Mega Man 8 and the flashback from Mega Man X4. While that may be circumstantial, all the pieces are in the game. Isaac has that burning hatred for Mega Man X that Sigma said he had, but also a love of and control over Zero. The story makes sure to tell us that X and Zero are two Reploids no one really knows or understands the history of, and this guy can just stop Zero in place? Who else other than Dr. Wily could do that? While X has a lot of enemies at this point, Dr. Wily would definitely be one of them, X being made by Dr. Light after all. Speaking of which, he's also reborn in a sense as an AI. I threw a tantrum in my old X videos over X5 retconning Dr. Light into an AI as opposed to a pre-recorded message, but this is something I was just getting absolutely wrong. I mean, X4 literally shows Light's AI talking with X about the Repliforce situation. Only an AI could have done that, not a pre-recorded message. As far back as X1, Light tells X that he developed these armors for him because it seems fighting's the only way, which doesn't make sense for Dr. Light to say and do in an era of relative peace. The AI works on all these armors whenever X needs them, and then the AI sends these pods to X in convenient locations. I mean, why else would a light capsule literally be in the moving base of Wheel Gator in X2 or the floating fortress of Wind Krorang in X7? But enough roasting my old talking points. Dr. Wily is definitely in X6 as Isaac, and he was also the leader of the X-Hunters in Mega Man X2, basically confirming it in the Japanese script of that game. He can switch bodies by simply transferring the DNA soul from one of his bodies into another one, as seen by his shutting down his body after Gate is defeated. Alia mentions that what happened to him is very reminiscent of the incident in Mega Man Extreme 2 where Reploids' DNA souls were getting stolen. Again, more continuity from other games coming back to the forefront, and I can definitely dig that. The only thing in X6's story I really felt was unneeded was the return of Sigma. Not even like Sigma as a character in X6 is bad. I mean, the design concept for him is that he's not complete and barely functioning, as seen in this zombified form. That's cool, but he really serves no purpose in this story. He only appears at the very last level and just serves as a free final boss fight, when it really could have just been Gate, or even Isaac if you wanted to give him more payoff. Sigma here really feels out of place. I obviously have handed out a lot of criticism towards Sigma as a character in the past, but like I said earlier, I'd say that's much better saved for next week's video where things really go off the rails. In X6, it really is just that he's not needed rather than that he isn't good in this game. But besides Sigma's inclusion, I think X6 is a really interesting story, where I was interested in reading the text for all the various cutscenes, and that's purely thanks to the Tweaks project including a new translation. I can't thank them enough for that because I never knew how cool X6's story was until people told me about it, and I never got to experience it like that until now because I can barely understand what's even being said in the original. But we've been going on for the last half hour now discussing things I now appreciate about Mega Man X6. You know, less intrusive interruptions in the stages, faster paced levels compared to X5, cool unlockables, and an interesting story. However, I think it's time to close this video by discussing what has changed as a result of these things. The title of the video is Learning to Love Mega Man X6 because I wanted to look at the game from a different perspective and answer, what have I learned? Well, Mega Man X6 is still not a game I really enjoy playing. I appreciate some of the ideas in its stages, but through things like the nightmare system or the grinding needed for different parts, the alternate routes, the default X6 is just kind of a chore to think of replaying. There are so many exploits or weapons you can use to bypass things that made the game frustrating on a first run, but these only serve to make the game really easy throughout, and also in a way that's kind of dull. However, I really wasn't having a terrible time while playing it for the video. It's just not a game you'd see me come back to, which was really cemented when I got to Metal Shark Player's stage, which I saved for last. I really dislike this level. It's the worst kind of stage. It goes on for an eternity and sees you barely moving. It just bores me out of my skull. But things really went south when I reached the Fortress stages, in particular Secret Lab 2. Of course, I had the jumper parts equipped with Shadow Armor X and not the Hyper Dash, which meant I couldn't make this stupid jump in the second section. I had to leave, equip the Hyper Dash instead, play the first half of the stage again, and then I could proceed. Stuff like that is why I find X6 to be unpleasant to play overall. Even though I've played it enough times to where I appreciate things about it, I could never recommend this game to someone who hasn't played it. X5 is a game I'd tell someone who likes the other games to try out because it's not a terrible game, it's just not that fun to replay. Any first-time player of X6 would probably encounter a lot of confusion and frustration. They'd play the intro stage of X6 and think it's fine, but then they play with the awful camera on Commander Yamark stage. As if that wasn't bad enough, deal with the RNG of Ground Scaravich. Then Infinity Majin, which is literally not a level, it's just a straight line with enemies on it. And yada yada yada. That sentence was ripped directly from my original review of X6 because I still think that's how the experience goes with this game. But things have changed for me because, well, for starters, I'm not a first-time player of X6. I've been playing this game for almost a decade, so I can't just pretend I'm some newcomer and review it like so. I know a bunch of cheeses and exploits, and with that, there are some good moments to play with this game. And the Improvement Project really cleans up X6 to be a game. Maybe you won't see me return to it all the time, but if I were, say, binging the X series, I would definitely come back to the Project version because it was a massive improvement over the original, which I already now have an understanding of. And there's the Customization Project, which really adds a ton of replay value to the game, and we'll definitely keep coming back to that. As I said though, I didn't want to rage this game this time around, which is why the original video can stay where it is. And today I could just do something different. I really did think it was going to be interesting to just look at the bright side of X6 for a change. And yeah, I didn't come out loving the game, but I think it produced a really interesting video, one that I really enjoyed writing, and I meant every compliment I gave the game. If you like X6 as a whole, that's just fine. You do you. Have fun with that, and do what I said in the X3 review. Feel free to speak your mind, because I don't have the popular opinion when it comes to saying X2 and X3 are like perfect games to me, but I just say how I feel, and that's that. Next time I'm going to be talking about Mega Man X7, and let me just say, there's no light at the end of the tunnel for that one. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.